Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Programming. So, I typically don't like to use PowerPoint because I feel it's a little cliche, but today we're gonna cover theoretical stuff. We're not actually gonna start coding, but the reason is we have to cover this theoretical aspects because they tell you how to organize your code. You know how to think about it before you write it, and this is very important if you're gonna write like a big program, which is if you're a software developer, you're gonna most likely need to do that anyway. And so this is just like an introduction video. We're gonna talk about programming, what makes it great, yada yada yada. If you wanna jump to programming right away and ignore this stuff completely, just wait for the next video. And yeah, so I guess we should get started. So first of all, we have the puzzle of the day. I will be posting puzzles at the beginning of every video, and that's because if you're familiar with interviews in the software industry, like interviews from Google and Microsoft and whoever, you're gonna need to know they're gonna ask you like a lot of cryptic puzzles like this. They're gonna ask you for like puzzles that may not even be related to coding, but it's meant to get you thinking. And you know since in programming you're gonna need to be a thinker more than I guess a doer. I don't know like what's the correct term, but you're gonna need to get your brain starting. And so I feel that it's a good way to pose these puzzles to get the brain working. you know you're just gonna look at the puzzle right here, and then if you think of a solution, you can compare it with the one right here. Typically, a lot of these question puzzles have multiple solutions, so it's okay if your answer. So if your answer works, but it's not the same as this one, it's usually okay. Um, in fact, if you have an answer that's different, I actually would encourage you to share it with other people. Maybe it will be a really great one. And as I said, this will be a good way to think, and at the same time, maybe you'll get interviewed and get asked this question, and then you're gonna know the answer. So okay, why is programming awesome? If you're a beginner, or if you're still thinking if you want to be a programmer, why is it good? Obviously everyone is gonna have his own preference, but personally I think programming is awesome because, well, everyone uses computers. you know Pretty much every business is going to need you in to do something for them. You could be working for a lawyer, you could be working for a military, you could be working for a government agency, the movie industry, and you're going to need to know all of these. And then they're going to hire you, and in an era where not everyone can find jobs, this is really helpful. And the other things I really like about programming is that, honestly, from experience, was enough knowledge, anyone can be great, and he could make like something that would be like the next killer successful app. It could be something like, I don't know, something like Facebook. It started as a small studio. It could be something like the next Flappy Bird. The next, I don't know, Call of Duty. Just something that would be great. That will make lots of people happy, and at the same time will make you successful. And at the same time, programming always needs innovation. If you feel that there is something that hasn't been done yet, you can always do it yourself. And in fact, a lot of people will appreciate it this way. You're never gonna feel that you're out of ideas, because it's the internet. Everybody's gonna want something. Everyone has an iPhone, and everyone's gonna want a certain app. You can make it for them. You know, and it's pretty much just like, it's basically something that connects us all together, as a programmer. Not like, I'm not trying to be cheesy, but if you think about it, it's just like, that's the whole. Programming can really unite everyone together. All right, so I guess just a little did you know, in China they want kids in elementary school to start learning programming, and they claim this will improve innovation. And the way I look at it is that if they can do it, then we certainly can. Programming isn't really that hard if you think about it. It's just knowing where to look, where to practice. It's probably that's the hardest thing about programming, in my opinion. And in fact, out of 7 out of the last 10 most respected companies, according to the Time magazine, are actually software based. Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. Yada yada. And then, okay, so what will be taught today? This is the objectives. So let's start with algorithm. This is the Oxford definition. If it's probably too complicated, just think of it as basically kind of like it's basically a problem, and you need to find a step-by-step solution to that problem. That solution is going to be the algorithm. You can think of it as the cooking recipe. If I told you, if I give you a problem and I'm like, okay, I want to make a cake, then you're going to go around and you're going to say, all right, here is the recipe. Here is a step-by-step solution. These 3 steps are to some extent an algorithm. So basically, that's the first thing you need to learn to know about programming, is that you're always gonna have like a certain problem, and you're gonna need to write a step-by-step approach to how to fix it. And in order to organize that step-by-step approach, sometimes people like to use something called the pseudocode. The pseudocode is basically this right here. It's basically a simplified blueprint of an algorithm. So, when you program, you're gonna use a programming language, and that's something that's gonna be understood by the machine. But in pseudocode, you wanna make it. You're gonna use the regular English language, but you're gonna write it in conventions similar to the programming language. You know, so like in here, it's talking about setting total to 0, and then if you don't understand this right now, it's fine, because we still haven't talked about coding yet. But this is basically what a pseudocode kind of looks like. And if you what I like to do in when I write a code is that I like to put comments before for every step, so that I know what I need to write. Like for example, if I hear let me delete this. Let's say I wanted to write a code for adding 2 numbers. That's something very simple. But let's say I just wanted to comment about every single step of the way. I'm gonna write the comment sign, which is this guy right here, and then I'm gonna think about what I need. Typically, the best way to start thinking about it is that every program needs input, and every program is gonna need some sort of output, and it's gonna need something in between that would connect them together. Like the input could be like a certain button, a certain number, as I guess gamepad if you're developing a game, and then the output would be like either a sound, or a screen, or a display, or something like that. In our case, since we want to write a program that adds 2 numbers together, we're gonna think about our inputs, and then we're gonna think about our outputs, and then we're gonna think about, I guess, what we need in between, like the logic, if it makes it simpler for you. So for the inputs, what for addition, we're only gonna need 2 numbers or 3, or whatever we're gonna add. So let's just say we only need to add 2 numbers. So we're gonna say we need our first number. Let's just call it number 1, and then we need our number 2, and then for the outputs we're gonna need 1 number that adds them together, or we can just call it sum or total, or whatever. So now we already have our inputs and our outputs. So for the between logic, all we need to think about is how this is gonna work, and in the case of addition, well, all we need is just an operation. And that's really it. Addition is already kind of defined in programming, so you could just call it right away. And this is obviously a very simplified example, but this is a good way for you to think about the code that before you write it. Because in the future you're gonna have to work at like bigger code. You may work at a program that's like 100 lines, maybe like 1,000, maybe more, and you're gonna need to think about what you need to write before you write it. Right now I'm making it very simplified because I haven't talked about a lot of coding terminology, but this will do for now. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so what's the programming language? Um, the Basically think of a computer or the machine as just a friend from who speaks another language, and you need to learn that language to be able to speak to him. And the thing about that friend is that he's gonna take what you're saying literally because he doesn't understand your language perfectly, and so you're gonna need to understand how to speak to him and make him do the stuff you want. How to tell him to display something, to show something, to answer something. This is basically programming language is what you're going to use. And for typically we're only going to focus on software languages. There are some like hardware languages that tell you how to speak to the hardware directly, but we're not going to cover those in here. For the programming languages, there are C++, Java, C Sharp, Python, and there's a lot of other ones. Typically, a lot of people I see use either C++ or Java, especially in college. Our main focus will be C Sharp because C Sharp is not exactly the same, but pretty similar to C++. But the thing is, I feel it's better than both of them because it doesn't have the memory problems that Java has. It doesn't have the C++ hardware problems that sometimes show up. It's kind of like a mixture of both. At the same time, I will be talking about those, too. I'll touch C++ and Java as well, because the good thing about if you understand programming is that it's very easy to switch from one language to another. They all use the same logic. It's just a different way of saying it. So it won't be hard for you to switch from being a Java developer to a C++. If you're like intermediate or advanced, you're probably gonna already know all those three or maybe even more. I guess we could talk about the tips for starters. These are basically my personal advice about what you should do if you want to be like, if you want to learn quickly. Basically, first of all, every time you learn something new, you need to either copy it or at least have enough practice with it, because if you actually like just look at the code and then go to the next step without, writing it, you're gonna get overwhelmed when you learn like other topics as well. So basically, like every time I'm gonna write a code, I'm gonna give you time to write after me, because if you don't, it's gonna get confusing later on. And the other thing about programming is that I feel it's experience based. It may start confusing, which is actually it's my next point. It's okay to be confused, but with enough practice, you're gonna have that one day where you actually feel that, oh, you know what, I understand this and I understand this well. In fact, like from what I've seen so far, including myself, every developer has that one day where they feel struggling, like where they feel that, okay, maybe I don't understand programming. But the truth is, it just needs experience and practice. And eventually you're gonna get it and everything will be fine. And the last point I'd like to say is it's okay to make mistakes. Even the most experienced will always make mistakes. It's something perfectly natural. In fact, you're always gonna have that one day where you're gonna have an error and you're not even sure what's causing it. Not you have no idea. Everything looks fine. That's perfectly normal, and programmers experience this all the time. So my best advice is just don't give up. It's normal to make errors. All right. So lastly, I just wanted to end with this programming joke because pretty much this talks about what I said in the last slide. It's perfectly fine to have errors. Programmers will always gonna have always gonna not understand certain aspects, but with enough practice, they're gonna be good. So, guys, we actually ended this introduction presentation. As I said before, I don't usually like to use PowerPoint, and in fact, I need to apologize that I didn't make this full screen. The thing is, I'm using a program called OBS, and whenever I turn this into full screen, for some reason, he doesn't record well. So I decided, you know what, for now it will be fine. Next video, we're actually gonna start coding. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Leave any feedback. If you like this, please tell me, and all that good stuff.